Say something.
Check, check, check.
Okay, we're Gucci.
All right, ready? What is up, everybody? Brandon Palaniuk here. Got a Table Rock round 2 redemption round, stage 7, whatever you want to call it, recap from Table Rock. The second time around. It was a good week, much better week. Finished 52nd in stage 6, came back to Table Rock, finished 2nd. So we needed that for Red Crest points. We needed it for mental stability. You know, that's a big thing. Mental stability. When you finish 52nd, you need to come back and have a good one. So, give you guys a little rundown. Rods, reels, line, tackle. They got it done. GoPros are shutting off. So, dive into that. We'll show you guys contour lines, how I broke down Table Rock, and really how I approached the week, because I knew coming into this, I learned from the previous time, pretty much spent all my time offshore. I think I went to the bank for maybe 10 minutes during practice and just kept telling myself, look, you need to go back offshore. So it's what I did, idled around, put a ton of time on the Yamaha, and spent a lot of time looking at my birds. So tackle-wise first, probably the /1 killer for me during that week was the new Zoom Z-Swim 3.8, throwing it on a 3/8 ounce ball head, finesse swim bait head. And that little dude right there was my #1 ticket for that week. So I could use it to find a lot of fish, you know, in groups of fish. But really, what I did is it came down to my practice and finding these schools of fish and these groups of fish, and I could literally got it to the point where I could look at the contour lines and find these fish, and I could actually separate the species by the contour lines. So how those contour lines were set up, I knew if they were going to be spotted bass, smallmouth, or largemouth. Every once in a while a mix, but you could separate them. The big thing with this bait was it has your traditional rib style body, but the tail is a little bit more limber. And so instead of just having this wide, just kind of slow cross action, it has a little bit more of a roll in the tail because it allows that tail section to fold up a little bit more. And I was fishing this in 20 to 35 foot of water. So that's why I had the 3/8 ounce. Fishing it super slow, and I wanted to keep it down. So I spooled it up with 10-pound Seagar Invisex fluorocarbon, super small diameter, plenty of strength to get those fish out, you know, fishing around brush piles, cables, and stuff like that. And for the business end of it, Alpha Angler clutch. So I haven't got to use this rod a lot in tournaments. I've used it a ton just fun fishing. It's one of my favorite rods for like power finesse type stuff like this, right? Smaller swim bait type stuff, power drop shot and things like that. But it's a 7.5 medium action rod. It's a pretty hard blank to find, but we designed this one specifically for those situations. Lighter line, but still wanting that power of a bait caster. Spooling it up on the Daiwa Steez A. Usually I throw the 7.1 to 1. This week, 6.3 to 1. That's going to allow us to have that nice slow spool. It kind of forced me to slow down, and it really helps keep that bait down there. So I'm not going to get into too much of what I was fishing those around. We'll talk about that more as we dive into the hummingbirds and the Lake Master charts. But moving on to the next bait that I caught the majority of my fish on, this would be Zoom trick worm, green pumpkin purple fleck, and I was just rigging it on a drop shot. #1 VMC finesse Nico hook and a new VMC teardrop tungsten weight that they're coming out with at ICAST. So weight will be available soon. Hook, worm, you can get that right now. And spooling it up with my favorite leader line ever built, Seagar Tatsu. So super thin diameter, just the right amount of stretch in there. Spooling it up this week on 8-pound test. So fishing around that cover, I wanted just a little bit more abrasion resistance. So we went with the 8-pound test, tying it up with a crazy Alberto knot to the 15-pound Seaguar flash green smackdown braid, getting the job done. That way I can see my line when it's sinking. It's very important when you're fishing that deep and fishing isolated pieces of cover. A lot of times they eat it on the fall, and you want to be able to see them eat it before they get you into the cover. So it's important to be able to see your line. And then putting it on the Daiwa Exist 3000, favorite spinning reel of all time. You guys have heard me talk a lot about that one. And then rigging it up, Alpha Angler DSR, stands for drop shot rod. So anytime I'm fishing a drop shot, I've got it on the DSR. And if you guys have been following my Instagram social posts, and you guys will see in this video, a lot of those spots, they come up and they want to jump, or the smallmouth, they're wild, they get around the side of the boat and they're jumping, and the bend and the action of that rod is what's really important. So you can see how it flexes back here into all the way almost to the handle, but it has a ton of power still. It has a very even parabolic bend to it that allows you to throw that lighter line around heavier cover, still have power, and better odds of landing them next to the boat. One thing that was different this week, we fished 12 p.m., so noon to 8 p.m. Right? Completely different than anything or any tournament that I've ever fished other than just local stuff at home. But the last day we switched, and so championship Wednesday, we went 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So pretty much all of my fish the first 2 days, trick worm and the Zoom Z swim. But that final day, being in the morning, there was some schooling activity. I busted out the Storm Arashi Topwalker, size 13, added a VMC feather treble on the back, throwing it in bluegill color. Don't ask me why. Wasn't really targeting bluegill, but I just like this color. The dark lines break it up a little bit, but a lot of that shad kind of had a greenish bluish hue to it if you saw them in the water column, and this bait, this color, does a great job of imitating that. So had it spooled up, 20-pound Seaguar Rippin' Mono for a little bit of leader. That helps add stiffness so that your bait doesn't get caught up in the braid, which is 40-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid. Spooled up, Alpha Angler Slasher, 610 medium. So plenty of power, light tip. That's where I throw all my jerk baits, all my top water on. And then spooled up on the Daiwa Tatula 100, 8.1 to 1. So when these fish would eat it, I had to get on them quick because they're pretty wild, schooling activity. And what I noticed is that they would try to eat it at the same time, right? One from this way, one from this way, and they'd knock it all over. And so when that happened, they would knock a lot of slack in your line. You wanted that 8.1 to be able to catch up to them. So those were pretty much 3 main baits. Kept it super simple, and it was all kind of about area, adjustments, and being in the right place at the right time. So let's hop in, show you guys a little bit more detail of the contour lines I was looking for, break it down, show you guys how to tell the difference of where the spots, smallmouth and largemouth, were living, and a couple little different things that I was looking for. So let's check that out. So one of the big things that I was looking for, and this applied to spotted bass, which I probably caught mostly spotted bass, then I would say smallmouth, and then largemouth after that. But the biggest ones I caught were the largemouth. But really targeting the spotted bass, you can see how you've got these super steep contour lines that come together, right? So it's kind of flat here, and it wraps into these steep contour lines. And those spots, we're using this deep water to transition back and forth. They would go out here, suspend over deep water, and then they would feed. And you'd see I got a brush pile marked here, another brush pile marked here. And that's where those spots would really load up. Like, I never caught a smallmouth or a largemouth out here. They were all spots. But then I would roll around, and this is a perfect example of how this worked out. You roll around here to where it just started flattening out a little bit, and you would get a mix right here. And that's why I've got a purple mark here, because there was a big group of fish here. They were largemouth, they were spotted bass, and smallmouth. or spots, excuse me. There were largemouth, smallmouth, and spots, all using this one rock pile. And it's where it flattens out. But those smallmouth and those largemouth did not transition out to those steeper breaks. So let's see if I can zoom out here a little bit and just give you guys another example of kind of where these fish were hanging out. So you can see how you've got this creek channel swinging in here, and everywhere those deep ditches were. So like this was a really cool spot right here where I was catching these fish over 50, 60 foot of water. Don't want to go too far in here. So you've got this super deep ditch coming in here, and these fish were suspended around these cables. And again, those were all spots. So like anywhere I had these really steep contour lines, dark lines coming together, that's where those spotted bass would be. I'll show you another one. This is where I caught quite a few fish that last morning. Bluff wall, comes off the bluff end, and those fish were actually sitting right on the edge of that bluff wall. So I would idle around these places in practice, find the brush piles, find the little rock outcroppings, and on Lake Master you can see, makes that little turn. Well, there was a rock pile there. And that's where a lot of the group of those fish would be. They'd suspend out here, bait fish come by, they'd push them up against, and they would blow up on them up against the surface where those contour lines come up. And that's pretty much all I did. I idled around all practice, looking for those places. You know, you slide over, see if I can do it without zooming out too far. Slide over here, let me zoom out a little bit. So this is where a lot more of the largemouth were hanging out. And you can see there's still deep contours out here, but it's the little things that make the difference. You've got a flatter section that rolls around here, and they were on the sides of those points a lot of times. This is one little place where I actually caught the biggest largemouth I caught all week. But they were on these little bit shallower, little bit flatter pieces of structure is where those bigger largemouth were. So the spots were on those deep, straight contour lines, places they had access to that deep water. They could suspend around something, brush pile, standing timber, rocks, or the smallmouth were on more gravelly places that had bigger chunk rock mixed in, and then the largemouth were on you know, a little bit like sandier, gravelier bottoms, but a little bit shallower, right? They were just a hair shallower. They were more in that 20-foot zone, and then everything else was just a little bit deeper. So that's how we broke down Table Rock, finished up second. Awesome week. Don't mind the you know, little kids casting rods or the pink tackle box on my front deck. That's for a challenge video coming up later. Kyle challenged me to a one-on-one challenge, and I have to catch him on gummy worms. So
you guys can check the video.
yeah, just
It's gonna be up here.
watch that later.
God.
You're in so much trouble.